All right. We're back and let's jump in on Ramakrishna with these words. I mean, that's the thing. All of this happened within a stone's throw of everything we just saw. And I tell you, if you were here, have those eyes to see and those ears to hear, this place will, oops, now what have I done? What in the world? Okay. Well, this thing gets touchy. Anyway, yeah, the energy here. I mean, I don't think that's California terms. Oh my God, the vibe. The vibe in this place is like, oh my God, it's so top drawer. It's it really is. It really is crazy. It's beautiful, but it's thick everywhere. And yeah, I mean, I've been here a solid little over, so about a week and a half now, 10 days, I guess. And I was sitting last night. I was just kind of holding my head a little bit as I was laying there in bed because I literally just felt full. Like I've reached my maximum of inspiration. Like I can't take anymore. It's like it's it's become an inhibitive problem. I can't. I just fumble around becoming my natural self, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it's wonderful. If you guys can get here, I mean, the guest house, I should have shown you the Western guest house. It was up when we were looking at the president's quarters down at the far end where the cremation area was. To the right of that, there's an old street that heads off down toward the river to the docks where you catch the boat to Dakshineshwar and other places. And on the right-hand side there's a beautiful guest house that's also surrounded with gardens like this. And just, just lovely. So Stephen just posted a message. Stephen, you were the reason I was off just kind of leading everybody around and wasn't paying attention to the waiting room. So you saved several people because I probably wouldn't have been thought of them until now. So I'm glad you texted me. Thanks for that.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. No, that was great. Okay. All right. So we are on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It's hard to get to the chapters. We're on Friday, June 20th, 1884. Quite a ways into it here. And is talking with the master, and the master is carrying on about the supreme power here. He says, you may feel 1,000 times that it is all magic, but you are still under the control of the Divine Mother. You cannot escape her. You are not free. You must do what she makes you do. A man attains Brahmagyana, the knowledge of God, only when it is given to him by the Adya Shakti, the Divine Mother. Then alone does he see the whole thing as magic, otherwise not. This notion. Yesterday, I was I was walking out around the temples, and an young Indian man came up with his phone, just like I was just walking around, and he wanted to interview me real quick for his channel. He had a YouTube he had a YouTube channel, and so he kept referring to me as the foreign monk. As when he was addressing his audience, and I said, I'm not a foreign monk. I'm a monk. Monks don't have countries. And he looked at me like that had never occurred to him before. He was like, monks don't have countries. Oh. And then he asked my opinion on, tell me what your opinion is of Ramakrishna, and who was Holy Mother, and who was Vivekananda. So we went through that whole list, and when I came to Mother, it was just like, I just was for a moment just taken for a second as I kind of thought in my mind, what is Holy Mother? And I just said, everything. Everything you're tasting, hearing, touching, smelling, and that which is tasting, touching, and hearing, smelling is Mother. She is embracing everything, everyone, everywhere, all the time. chastising, nourishing, encouraging, loving, always, everywhere. And when we talk about this magic, sometimes we think it's the outside magic. We look around and we're like, oh, look, mother has become everything. But we don't let her in behind our eyes. We don't realize that's where the real magic is happening, that you don't recognize yourself as the Divine Mother herself. You have forgotten so thoroughly that you're looking out there at Mother, celebrating Mother, but it's Mother herself who is celebrating Mother in you and seeing Mother through you. So you may feel 1,000 times that it's all magic, but you're still under the control. You still have this egoism. You still have this sense of separateness. So even when we're feeling our highest spiritual states, when we're feeling the deepest blisses that we have access to at this point, even in those states, we're still under the spell because we think we're experiencing them because we're separate from them. We don't have this knowledge that all of that beauty is what we are, that we are the noun of the verb. We are the origin of all beauty, of all wisdom, of all love, and that everything we see is merely reflected. We recognize it because we are it. We never had to have a class on what is beautiful. We never had to have a class on what is love. It's like we know instinctively when we see it because it is our own reflection everywhere. And Thakur is saying, no, that Mother decides. It is the Divine Mother that gives you your release, your freedom. And that is the source of our knowing, our understanding of that. He says, as long as the slightest trace of ego remains, one lives within the jurisdiction of this Adya Shakti, of the Divine Mother. One is under her sway. One cannot go beyond her. With the help of the Adya Shakti, God sports as an incarnation. God, through his Shakti, through his power, the Divine Feminine, incarnates himself as man. Then alone does it become possible for the incarnation to carry on his work. So even, the one without a second has to manifest through the Divine Mother, to have a body, to have a voice, to have a manifestation within his own dream. So it's the power of the Mother that allows us to see and experience the divine. And it's Mother that gives us our spiritual growth. And everything in what we perceive as the universe is there to take you toward God. And our great mistake is that we find things, that not understanding that even the things that take us away from the thought of God are creating the suffering that will bring us back to God. And so in a sense, everything brings us to light, even the darkness. The darkness leads us into an ignorance, but it's an ignorance in which we suffer. We're uncomfortable because Mother does not want us to be comfortable in ignorance, in that darkness, that walking away from her, so that we return to that divine love. And if you do, life just gets more and more difficult. More and more egoistic you become, the more fragile you become, the meaner you become, the more difficult to be around you become. So the Divine Mother gives us everything. She's nurturing us at this moment with these own words that she is speaking to us. When anyone asked the former manager of the temple garden a great favor, the manager would say, come after 2 or 3 days. He must ask the proprietor's permission. Or if you lived with Swami Prabhupada, you know this. you would go and ask for anything. Oh, let us see. That was, even if the deadline was an hour and a half away. Oh, let us see. So you must ask the proprietor's permission. So everything, that was what Ramakrishna's deal with Girish Ghosh was, that power of attorney. By taking his power, by giving Thakur, Ramakrishna, his power of attorney, he thought he was getting it easy because he didn't have to do anything himself. But then he realized what that meant. He couldn't do anything himself. He had to go and get permission for every little task that he did. He had to be in the presence constantly to get the power of attorney to move, to use his own body, own mind, to live his own life. and it turned him into a saint. So Taco really tricked him. Girish laughed about that later in his life, saying, "Yes, he really tricked me. I should have taken the first option, just saying the name once a day." So God will incarnate himself as Kalki at the end of the Kali Yuga. He will be born as the son of a Brahmin. Suddenly and unexpectedly, a sword and a horse will come to him. Adar returned to the master's room after watching the evening worship in the temples. Yeah, so this Kalki, this terrifying manifestation of the divine, where the demons. Greg, can you tell us any more about Kalki? Do you know anything off the top of your head?
Oh, he's, I think, the 10th incarnation in the traditional, like the Vishnu Purana that talks about the incarnations. He's supposed to come on a white horse with a sword. We used to have a book in the basement of the monastery that was written by some Swami of the order. It was a little pamphlet. It was called Kalki Comes in 1985. He had figured out from all these different things that that was the year, but we haven't seen him yet. But maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so it'll be a bit. It's at the end of the Kali Yuga. So the end of the difficult period, we move into a Satya Yuga, the period of harmony, the period of peace. And so for that to happen, the demons will have to be slayed.
Sri Ramakrishna said, I mean, Swamiji said that the Satya Yuga began with the birth of Sri Ramakrishna. So
yeah,
who
Holy Mother
knows?
says that as well.
These are the kind of things that you just can't, they're you just have to take them in your own understanding, because there's no way to prove or disprove any of these kind of statements.
Right, and they have very little to do with our ego world.
Yeah.
These are universal. These are things that don't happen in mind, in disturbed mind. So he'll be born the son of a Brahmin. Suddenly and unexpectedly, a sword and a horse will come to him. Adar returned to the master's room after watching the evening worship in the temples. The master to Adar and the others. Bhuvan was here and brought me 25 Bombay mangoes and some sweets. She said to me, "Will you eat a mango?" I said, "My stomach is heavy today, and to tell you the truth, I'm feeling uncomfortable after eating a few of the sweets." Bhuvana Mohini was a nurse who used to visit Sri Ramakrishna now and then. The master could not eat food offerings of everyone, especially of physicians and nurses. It was because they accepted money from the sick in spite of the suffering of these people. Master, Keshav Sen's mother, sisters, and other relatives came here, so I had to dance a little. I had to entertain them. What else could I do? They were so grief-stricken. It's that's the wonder. We're very fortunate in these divine incarnations that love is their essence. Because you can see, like, when he says here, I had to dance a little, he was, not just talking about dancing, but the fact that he had to give, he had to put he had to be the incarnation, he had to be the inspiration, he had to be the whatever he was being. Take part in the divine play. We forget, we're all part of the divine play, but we think we're in it. Imagine if you knew that every time you went out your door that you were an actor in a play, and you had to put on this costume, you had to put on this persona, you had to obey your lines and follow your tracking and your blocking and make it all happen, and how tedious that would become, in that sense. to when that this is a costume, when that your whole being, your whole personality is an act, is an effort, is a concerted effort. I understood this a little bit after I joined the monastery. Out in the world, I lived in a persona. That was one of the most shocking things that has become ever clearer to me. But certainly the first 10 years, when that mask came off, because in the monastery I didn't have to be that. I've shared how Greg at the dinner table one time told me, after dinner when we were clearing the table, he says, you don't always have to say something. It's okay if there's silence at the dinner table. Because, I was used to dinner parties, and you never let the conversation die at the dinner party, never. And so, I was always the host, or I enjoyed being the host. And so I had a persona that I didn't even know was a persona that I actually lived in. This was who Vance was. This is how Vance acted. He was very entertaining. He was very funny and very witty, and he was sometimes rather caustic and sarcastic, but I thought that's who I was. I was really very comfortable in that space because it was driven by nervousness. It was driven by a discomfort with being around so many people all the time, which at the same time is what I craved at that time. And what a weird thing that was for me after 10 years of quiet in the monastery to realize when I would run into one of my old friends or like hang out with somebody who knew me from that period, that I would feel the temptation to turn that persona back on again. And I realized how exhausting that was, how much effort that actually took, and how much effort that energy that really burned without my even understanding, without my even knowing that I was literally playing a part, that I was being an idea of myself. I knew nothing of just being with no adjectives after it. Just being what you are and being content in that. That's one of the most beautiful things in spiritual life, is that you begin to understand that all the beautiful things you go to the temple for started in you. That the temples, the shrines, the incarnations, the beauty of everything we experience starts within you. And you have the original temple that all of the ones in the world are trying to copy within your own self. And that you take it's an absolute antithesis to the masks and the parts and the personalities and the niceisms, the polite mannerisms that we've developed to get through the world, that you're allowed to drop all of those. You're allowed to set them all down. And that when you do, you'll find your rest, that rest that Jesus talks about, the peace that passes understanding. That's why he says, follow me. My burden is light, my yoke is easy. I'm not an effort. I'm not an effort. I'm a surrender. I'm a release into pure being. And in there, you'll find that you are everything you ever sought to be already. That your persona never took you more toward love, never took you more toward unity. It was a projection of the love and the unity in you. And so the master, knowing this and seeing this, had to play those parts. And sometimes, he, being as pure as he was, he could feel the karma in things that were offered to him. In this place, he mentions, the medical profession, but at the same time, to put your life into nurturing the sick and caring for the sick, yes, there's the impurity of making money from that, but there's also the service. And so if you're not in it for the money, then he's not talking to you. If you're not doing it for that, if you're doing it for service and for love of God, it's like everything. Every other business is exactly the same thing. If you're working for kamani kanchana, if you're working for lust and greed, if you're working, doing these things to pay for your vacations and your enjoyments, then yes, there's impurity to it and there's a sting to it. But if you do it from love, it's an offering. It's that love that purifies everything, that touch of the divine that purifies everything. All right, chapter 24. If you're lost up until now, we're now entering chapter 24. Pandit Shashadhar. It's Wednesday, July 25th, 1884. It was the day of the Rath Yatra, the car festival of the Hindus. At Ishan's invitation, Sri Ramakrishna went to his house in Calcutta. For some time, the master had a desire to meet Pandit Shashadhar. Tarka Chudamani, who had been staying with one of Ishan's neighbors, so it was decided that he would visit the Pandit in the afternoon. A few devotees, including Hazra, accompanied the master to Ishan's house. Ishan had invited one or two Brahmin scholars and a devotee who followed the tantric method of worship. Shrish and Ishan's other sons were also present. The master noticed that the tantric worshipper had a vermilion mark on his forehead and smilingly said, "I see he is branded." You'll see that with usually when the wandering sadhus come through. We saw that one out there at Bellarmont. other sadhus who are coming here to, pay their respects and to go into the shrine. Most of them, almost all, I think pretty much I could say all the ones that I've seen bear some kind of pattern, either stripes or dots or an arrangement of dots or a D-lock, or sometimes the stripes go up down, sometimes they go across. But those are all brandings, as it were, the announcements or labels of ownership. That's funny that a brand can mean two things. It means like a branding on a cow, the mark of who owns you. So, and then it can also be your brand, as in, what you're marketing, what you're selling. And so it's probably true in both ways. So Ramakrishna sees us and he says, "Oh, I see he's branded." After a while, M and Narendra arrived and bowed before Sri Ramakrishna. The master had previously informed M that he would be at Ishan's house. As I'm saying that, I'm thinking, it's funny because I would associate that so much with India, those brandings like that. And yet in the West, we've got the exact same thing, and it's purely for lust and greed. All of our clothes are marked with who made them. So everybody's aware of how much you paid for them, how exclusive they are, and that's where their power comes from. And so they are all marks of worship. Those people who are worshiping Kamini Kanchani in the world wear their brands. They don't paint it on their forehead, but they'll wear it on their forehead. Their hat will have their label right there in the front. It'll be right there over your heart, on your chest. It'll be on your back pocket. It'll be on your belt. It'll be on the side of your shoes. We're all carrying our brands. And, the more you've spent on them, the greater devotee you are of those things. So this branding is everywhere. Be careful whose brand you wear. That was one of the only things that Swami Prabhupada didn't want. You could wear an orange shirt pretty much of any kind, but he wanted no label on it. No label on it. And you don't know how hard it is to find a nice shirt with no label on it. So, the master joked about the delay in serving their meal. One of the scholars quoted a Sanskrit verse about the anxiety created in people's minds by the pangs of hunger. Proceeding to explain the verse, he said, "The study of philosophy is indeed edifying, but poetry is more fascinating than philosophy. People listening to good poems think of the study of philosophy, Vedanta, Nyaya, Samkhya, and so forth, as dry and insipid. Again, music is more attractive than poetry. Music melts even a heart of stone. But a beautiful woman, right, or obviously a handsome man, has an even greater attraction for a man's heart than music. Such a woman passing by diverts a man's attention from both poetry and music. But when man feels the pangs of hunger, everything else, poetry, music, and woman, appears as of no consequence. Thus, hunger is the most arresting thing." This is another sign of constant I can't believe my mind is not thinking of that word. Constant discernment, discrimination. You start to see these things and you see these patterns. The hierarchy arranges in your mind. You begin to understand the nature of how this world works and how your mind works, which is the same thing, really. And that is so helpful. I've mentioned it before. Just Ramakrishna also says, there is nothing like discernment and renunciation. Holy Mother says that exact quote. There is nothing like discernment and renunciation. They are the gold of this living experience, this world. They are just the most lovely of things. That ability to see things as they are, to see them clearly through the knowledge of who you are, to understand the mystery, right? And to know its nature so that you're not trapped. That's what Vivekananda says, that religion isn't there to take away your enjoyment of the world. It's to teach you how to enjoy the world without getting caught in the world, without getting entangled, getting bound by the world. And so I read these lists like this, of how it goes, and it's humorous because it touches that place in us. We're like, oh yeah, well that's true. That's true. So you got philosophy, but better is poetry. But better is music. But better than that is the opposite sex or whatever you're attracted to. You know, that and then above and beyond all of that is hunger. You know, I've had some good friends who were delightful to be around unless they were hungry. Hunger is the most arresting thing. The master remarked with a smile, "Oh, the pundit is witty." Soon Narendra began to sing. A few moments later, the master went upstairs for a little rest. M and Shrish accompanied him. M introduced Shrish to the master, saying, "He is a scholar and a man of a peaceful nature. We were fellow students in our boyhood. Now he is a lawyer." Master, it is a pity that such a man should practice law. Well, he just says it, doesn't he? he just says it. M, yes, sir, it was a mistake on his part. The master, I know a few lawyers. One of them shows me great respect. He is a straightforward man. To Shrish, what is your idea about the most essential thing in life? Shrish, God exists and he alone does everything, but the attributes we ascribe to him are not the right ones. How can a man conceive of him? His nature is infinite. Master, what need is there of your counting the number of leaves and trees and branches in an orchard? You have come to the orchard to eat mangoes. Do that and be happy. The aim of human birth is to love God. Realize that love and be at peace. This is a verse to carry into your practice. You know, this is what we talk about when we say that you're not the doer in your practice. You come to your practice to eat mangoes. You go to your practice to enjoy the presence of God. You go to your practice to enjoy the presence of truth, you know, to enjoy the potential of your divinity, to know that you are realized somewhere in that pile of confusion in the mind. Somewhere in there lies your freedom. And you sit and you borrow on that, you enjoy that. So your practice isn't just doing your homework. It isn't just, you know, reading through stories of the past and stories of people who died. It's an investigation of the moment you're sitting in. And that moment should always be primary. Your presence in it should always be primary. And the fact that you're sitting in a dream which is composed of love, wisdom, and being has to be at the very center of that. So that your time with the beloved will always be inspiring. It'll always be challenging. It may sometimes be very difficult, but at the bottom of it, it will be beautiful. It will be peaceful. Suppose you've entered a tavern for a drink. Is it necessary for you to know how many gallons of wine there are in the tavern? One glass is enough for you. What need is there of your knowing the infinite qualities of God? You may discriminate for millions of years about God's attributes, and still you will not know them. The master remained silent a few minutes. That's silence. That's a throwaway sentence there that I would normally have just read over if it wasn't for my time here at Bellarmont this week. And just seeing these great swamis will say something like that. You know, we'll throw out a teaching like that, and then you can feel them own it. You know, they'll hear themselves say it, and then you can see it echo inside of them, and that there's a stillness that comes over them for a moment, a silence that comes over them for a moment as they are aware of the teaching that came out of their own mouth, you know, as if they heard it themselves for the first time, and they just settle into it. So I can just see the master, you know, saying this: you can discriminate for millions of years about God's attributes, and still you will not know them. The master remained silent for a few minutes. He threw that out there and then just sat. And that's, you know, the atmosphere of the room at that moment was getting warm, getting deep. There was a stillness there. The master remained silent a few minutes. A Brahmin pundit came into the room. All right, so we'll stop there for today.